back to another episode of the Bench Mob ENT podcast, special edition of Do You Know Your Team? Now, up until this point, we've done all NBA teams, but we got Griff on for our first ever Do You Know Your Team NFL episode. Griff, how you doing today?
What's up, Tone? Glad to be back on the Bench Mob Entertainment podcast. Always fun to hang out with the fam, if you will. I don't know if I know my team. The Seahawks are such an interesting team. So the trivia, the throwback stuff, I don't know. But even in the present, I don't know what we are. We're just like we were talking pre-show. We're just in the middle. I don't know what we are. So excited to talk about the Hawks and talk about NFL.
Make sure y'all subscribe, like, share, tell any and everybody. We're trying to be here for a good time and a long time. We're gonna start off with this. We're gonna do a little different for the NFL one because it's a little bit different from the NBA aspect. I'm not going to try to go through the history of the Seahawks and be like, did he play for their team? It's 53 roster spots. That's completely it's a completely different thing. We're gonna start off with most recently, season ended. Seahawks ended at 10-7. They did not make the playoffs. What was your thoughts on the Seahawks this season? And where do you see possibly, off season, some things that you might think that y'all need to work on, add to the team? 10-7, like you said, it's 10 wins, but it doesn't get you a good draft pick and y'all don't make the playoffs.
Yeah, no, it's a tough spot to be a Seahawks fan, but you can't complain at the end of the day. It's a new era. I think Mike McDonald was great in year one. We have to talk about the youngest head coach in the NFL right now, coming in with a defensive system, and we saw a lot of good defense this year. Unfortunately, the offense didn't quite translate. We had Ryan Grubb at OC. He came over from Washington. College to the NFL sometimes can be difficult, especially if you haven't been in the NFL at all. And we kind of saw that in his play calling style where it just didn't work. And unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you feel, we have let go of Ryan Grubb. So we're looking for a new OC. There's a lot of things about Clint Kubiak over in New Orleans. We might bring him in. We're doing interviews across the board. I hope that we get a coach that's in line with, what Mike McDonald wants to do on the offensive side and just revamp it overall. Year one, we're just going to write it off. It's 10-7 season. Like you said, it's not bad. It's not good. It's right in the middle. But now it's time to start making decisions. He's going to start drafting. He's going to start picking players that he wants. He's not tied to Geno Smiths of the world. He's not tied to our defensive side of young guys that are up next to get paid. And so it's going to be interesting to see. I wish I knew kind of a pulse of where we're going to go, but we could go many different directions and I wouldn't be upset. I think 10-7, right behind the Rams. We could have got in based on a couple of different tiebreakers. We could be talking about a different season here, but overall, I'm not too mad as a Seahawks fan. There was a lot of people down on us saying 5 wins, and they were saying that last year on 5 wins, and then we make it to the playoffs. So I don't know. It's a tough spot to be, but I'm a little bit optimistic for the future.
Do you think, though, after the one season, that it was really the right move to fire him? Or do you feel like if y'all had the right OC, it'd be a completely different season?
I don't know if it's the OC's fault, to be honest with you. Our offensive line was one of the worst in the NFL. You can look at any kind of stat category and you'll just see the pressure rates on Geno Smith were unfathomable. He had no time in the pocket. And so Ryan Grubb's coming from a system in UW where he got to coach Michael Penix and 3 offensive linemen that got drafted in the first 3 rounds of the NFL draft. He had a brick wall up there. And the only time Penix got trouble was when they played Michigan in the championship. And all of those guys got drafted on the defensive line for Michigan. So Ryan Grubb's coming from a system that worked. It's kind of air raid, West Coast, not run as much, but in Seattle, we have to lean on the run game a little bit more. And Ryan Grubb just didn't bring that. We had Charbonnet and we had Kenneth Walker kind of stumbling throughout the year. Charbonnet kind of picked it up by the end, and we might have to make an interesting decision on Kenneth Walker here coming up soon. And so the fact that we couldn't establish that, offensive line was bad. It's hard to say whether we should have gotten rid of Grubb. I'm never in the camp of getting rid of someone after year one, but if it was that bad internally, I must be missing something that I just don't know about.
Yeah, it might have been something behind in the meetings that we aren't privy to know about. I was shocked after one season. Like, to your point, still, it was still 10 wins. Like, a lot of franchises, some of our co-hosts, Giants and Jets fans, would have loved to see 10 wins still, possibly. So I was shocked when the news came out, but like you said, it's a different regime. He gets to make all decisions now as the head coach, who I want in there, what type of players, what type of system I'm going to have running. So will be interesting this offseason for your Seahawks regarding the draft. Super early, super duper early. But if they had you in the room with them and y'all preparing your draft board of what the needs are, what are you going to be looking for in this draft, what would it be? outside of O line, obviously.
Well, I was about to say first round we got to go O line, but here's the thing about John Schneider. He thinks that offensive linemen sometimes get overdrafted, especially guys on the interior of the offensive line. We'll see a couple years back we drafted Charles Cross on the left tackle spot. I think he's been solid, a little bit under the radar at times, but solid, not amazing, but solid. But then on the right side we had Abraham Lucas, who go Cougs. I love my Cougs. He's been on and off of injuries to start his career, so it's hard to know if his upside's worth it to keep him around. But to go back to it, when we think about guards and centers, that's where we really messed up. I mean, whenever you turned on a Seahawks game this season, you saw a snap going 50 yards above Geno Smith's head. And you're like, okay, we can't even get snapping the ball right, let alone protection. And so I know John Schneider, our GM, thinks there's a little bit overdrafting of certain positions like the interior offense line, but I think that's where we need to go. Or we can get an outside offensive tackle, if you will, like the Campbell kid out of LSU, and then move somebody on the inside. Maybe Abraham, we move him in a little bit. And so I think first round we got to go offensive line. If we're gonna go into this next era, it always starts by building in the trenches. And then on the opposite side, I mean, go get a linebacker or two. We tried Dotson, from the Buffalo Bills. That just didn't work out. Whenever the Seahawks have been sufficient, and whenever any team has been sufficient, we always talk about the middle linebacker on the team. So until you don't have a good middle linebacker, you're just not going to be a very good team. So I think those are the two biggest draft needs. And then hey, take a shot on a quarterback late. Why not? That's kind of my outlook there.
Yeah, that's definitely, we talk about it all the time ever since we've had you on an episode. The battle, even though it's not as sexy and it's kind of boring, the battle is still one in the trenches from the first time football was ever invented to now. It doesn't matter if you got a flea flicker, if you could throw the option. None of it matters if you can't block and if you can't get to the quarterback, get in the backfield for the running game to try to stop it. Point blank, period. It's old. It's an old since its existence, but it still is needed. Now I know for those that's watching that may not know for whatever reason, because Griff has been on this podcast quite often, but one of the big faces of part of NFL threads, which I know you're locked into the playoffs so far, what has been the biggest takeaway so far of the playoffs? And of course, we're going to need your Super Bowl pick.
Oh, see, this is good. I mean, my biggest takeaway from the playoffs is that the good teams were a lot better than I think we were giving credit. I think this year we really wanted to find an underdog, if you will. We really wanted to get behind the Broncos in this last round against the Bills, if you will. Everyone's like, oh, they're a little sneaky, like Bo Nix could do something. And then we're looking at other teams like the Chargers finally taking a step, but then they, fell flat. And then I think the sneaky team is kind of the Commanders, even though a lot of people had them beating the Bucks because that 3 versus 6 wasn't really, the seeding doesn't matter as much in the NFL as it does to March Madness, in basketball, if you will. So I think the biggest takeaway is we were all looking for answers about that next team up, but it's really just a continuation of last year in terms of the top teams. The Lions across the board. We got obviously the Chiefs still on top right now as we're filming. We got the Rams and Vikings up. Those are two teams that are kind of always in the mix. I'm interested to see what happens there. So I don't know. I think my biggest takeaway is we all were looking for an upset, and it's just like college football. We all wanted SMU to win and Boise State to win and all these fun teams, but the good teams come out on top, and that's just kind of how it is.
Yeah, it was a lot of, even on the show, we were talking about, yeah, the Chargers, this should be the year. Harbaugh, he going to be able to unlock it. And then something that was interesting is that I believe it was the first half where at the end of the game, J.K. Dobbins only had 9 rush attempts. Leading up to the playoffs, what got them there was that balanced attack, was making sure Herbert didn't have to throw it 40, 45 times. Another playoff game, a lot of interceptions. Before we go into the trivia, some of the other stuff, what's your viewpoint kind of on Herbert? Because it's been some people put the blame on him. Some said it was the offensive line. Some said they didn't have a balanced attack, which was on the OC. Herbert, another playoff game, 4 interceptions, underwhelming performance. Going forward, what's your thoughts on Herbert?
So I think we need to just have reasonable conversations about Herbert first and foremost. There's a lot of people that want to put people into certain rankings. They're like, is he top 10? Is he not? And et cetera. And we're prisoners of the moment. I mean, when you're on thread, some people don't even have Herbert in your top 10 quarterbacks. But if you were to start a franchise today, you definitely pick Herbert on your top 10. Like people are like, oh, Bryce Young ended the year better. I mean, Penix is coming on. And I'm like, okay, sure, if you want, but Herbert's still that guy. Like, he's still that guy across the board. And like you said, they went away from their identity. J.K. Dobbins got them there. It's kind of like the Eagles. The Eagles almost let it slip in this game if it wasn't for their defense by going away from Barkley early on. They weren't running the ball efficiently. Hurts didn't look like himself post concussion. And so I think when a team steps away from its identity, they kind of lose their composure during the game, because the Chargers, if you watch the first half, they had complete control on the road. But then they just kind of gave it up at the end by mistakes compounding onto each other. And a team that can kind of get away from that is a team that's going to be successful. Here's the problem with Herbert. He's only had 2 times now in the playoffs so far. 2 games in the playoffs. And he only has 0 wins, I should say. He's still searching for that first win, which is kind of crazy to think. Stroud's already got a win. 2 wins, actually, before they met. So I'm not ready to boot Herbert off of top 10 lists. I'm not ready to move him up. I think he's exactly where he is. I think he's still developing. This is year one in a new system, if you will. And if you think about all of the different things that have been put in his head since he entered the league, all the different coaches, he's got a lot going through his brain, and he's a really quiet kid across the board. And I think the takeaway from this season is that he really stepped out of his shell a little bit. You see a little bit more fire in him. You see a little bit more of this. And unfortunately, when they had to step away, he had to become a little bit more of a passer, which he's very capable of doing. It just made it a little bit harder. And we just have to give more props to the Texans defense. They showed up. At the end of the day, they showed up. It's not all on Herbert throwing interceptions. So yeah, that's kind of my thoughts on Herbert.
Yeah, they definitely stepped up because it wasn't like Shroud had some superb, excellent game. And when you look at the Texans this season as a whole, it's heavily been on the defense stepping up, being elite. For whatever reason, which is a whole nother episode, Shroud kind of had to step back that sophomore season. To your point, as you mentioned, we in the prisoner of moments, CJ Stroud is a top 5 quarterback. That was the conversation coming into this year. Oh, he'll be an MVP. He got Diggs now. He signed Antonio. They got all these people, and it didn't pan out. But their defense stepped up. Chargers defense was put in precarious situations to have to continually get stop after stop after stop, which was tough for them to actually try to accomplish. I'm intrigued to see how it goes because you think about, I'm not saying he's Peyton Manning, but Peyton Manning didn't start off his career having the best regarding interceptions. He wasn't starting at 50. He didn't start off throwing 55 touchdowns. That came later as he got better. So definitely something I think people should kind of pump
And
the
it's
brakes on that.
it's one game. There was a weird stat that came up in like the last 270 attempts or something on the road. That was his first interception. Like, before he then threw the other ones. Like, we have all played sports. When you're having a bad game or something happens and it just kind of unleashes the wagon a little bit and you're just gonna fall. It's just a wheelbarrow. It's just stumbling down. And so that can happen. It's just one game. I know it's on the biggest in the biggest like stage and whatnot, but it's a new system across the board. As Chargers fans, I would just be happy that there's a little bit of continuity. You know that the system can work. Your team's a little bit old on the defensive side. You were like a top scoring defense, which is one good metric. But if you're relying on scoring on defense, that's a whole different conversation you have to have. It's not just sturdy defense all the way. They need some help in the secondary. Who's Herbert throwing to as well? Lab McConkey is great, but we also have Will Disley. We have Joshua Palmer. We have like guys that you wouldn't be picking up on your fantasy team to throw that out there. So I think a little bit more needs to happen. And this season was a success overall. And if we're prisoners of the moment, we're going to let this affect how we feel about Herbert. But if you go back, it was his career low in interceptions, career high in touchdowns or something like that. It was a successful season for Herbert. So I'm not ready to just throw him in the mud off of this one performance that was unfortunately not very good.
That's the thing that people got to remember too. When it comes to the NFL, it's one game versus the NBA. You can have a bad game one, and you come back game two, fix it. With the NFL, which is great in its own right, hey, you could catch fire, or you could have a bad game, and you gotta sit with that till next year and use that as your motivation in the whole offseason. Like you said, hey, get him a little couple more weapons that are like premier. No disrespect to anybody on the roster. Lad McConkey, he had a pretty good game himself, but it's still, if you have somebody coupled with that, you're looking at a completely different Chargers offense and help for Herbert. I gotta ask, it's super early. Like you said, Vikings Rams is going on right now. Who's your Super Bowl pick?
So it's really hard because I really want to see what the Lions and the Chiefs look like because that feels like the easy pick. But as we've seen with the college football playoffs, and I don't know if this is going to translate to the NFL, but buys in the first round are relatively new. But we saw in the college football playoffs, buys did not serve any of those teams well. All of those teams lost that had a buy. So when we look at the playoffs, you're thinking like, oh, the Chiefs and Lions, a little bit more time to get healthy. You're seeing Travis Kelsey talking about how he's feeling good, just sitting around doing podcasts for a week. Like, I want to say Chiefs and Lions. That feels like the easy answer. But gosh, whoever wins the Ravens and Bills game is going to be coming off of two big wins to then face either the Texans or Chiefs. So it feels like the winner of that game is going to be so battle tested that they're going to be the representative. So I'm going to say Bills or Ravens coming in and ending the three-peat streak of the Chiefs. And then on the NFC side, I wanted to like the Eagles, but I didn't really love their performance against the Green Bay Packers last week. And then the Commanders, I mean, I like them, but they are a rookie team. There is a ceiling. Like, it's just like when we were saying Jayden Daniels, hey, you're going to be the MVP this season. Like, whoa, let's like calm down. Jayden Daniels isn't going to win a Super Bowl in year one. Let's be a little serious here for a second. So I think I'm going to go with the Lions because they're the most battle tested. But hey, you see the Rams or the Vikings come back for a little bit of revenge on that team. The Rams, as of last year, trying to beat them. And then the Vikings, as of 2 weeks ago, you could see a similar situation where the winner of that game that then beats the Lion goes on. So I know I gave a really roundabout answer. I'm going to say Chiefs and Lions, but I'm telling you, those two other premium matchups that are going on right now, one of those two teams could come to the end as well and maybe surprise us.
Hey, I am locked in for this playoffs. Definitely Bills, Ravens. Definitely, that's a factor. That to have that be our next game. It's like you guys won. Congratulations. Here, go play Lamar Jackson. Here, go play Josh Allen. What a great second round like to
Yeah,
have.
exactly.
Congratulations, you won. Like dang. And then the
Yeah.
Texans get to have a rested Chiefs squad. Which hey, like you to your point with the college football playoffs. Let's see if the Chiefs can turn it on the
Mhm.
playoffs. We don't like what we saw from them this season, offensively, up and down. Travis, they're asking you for a reason because you didn't have the best of seasons, your normal Travis Kelsey season. So we'll have
It's
you on, definitely for sure.
It's just crazy though to think that we all, and I talked to Haley on my podcast about this, who covers the Chiefs specifically. It's kind of interesting. We're like, oh, the Chiefs weren't the Chiefs of old. They still won 15 games and only lost like one or two times. Like, can we just talk about this? Might be the first team in NFL history that has won that many games that we're talking so poorly about. Like, yes, they've won in weird ways. It wasn't fun to watch, but they won. Isn't that what you want from a potential champion? The ones that can win in the worst ways. Now, a Texans team that we thought was asleep and the Chargers were going to roll over, an easy little upset pick because of the way they ended their season, the injuries, etc. They came alive. So, like you said, can the Chiefs not be lulled into comfort with this matchup and not be asleep? We've already beat them. It's okay. Because the Texans, I'm a little bit worried. I mean, they're going to come out, they're ready to go. I mean, a big win in round one sometimes goes a long way for a team. So I don't know. The Chiefs disrespect though is kind of crazy, I have to say.
Yeah, it's they just figured out how to win, and that's kind of like their superpower. It's like they have the same, pretty much the same core. You got the coach. We know how to win, and that's kind of what it was throughout the whole season. Obviously, this wasn't the case, but it kind of was. They was like, all right, let's see if we can win this way. All right, let's go down by 15. Let's see if we can win.
Yeah.
Let's only have 10 points going into the fourth quarter, and let's go score two touchdowns. Let's wait till the last 2 minutes. Pat, do your thing, Pat, and go get it done. Like whatever way possible they could have won, they won, which makes them scary. Because statistically, it wasn't the best typical season, but they still were 15-2. And that second game, that second loss, we not even the
No, it's
stars
not
didn't
even a
play.
loss, really. It's not.
They didn't. Carson Wentz played, and I don't know if he'll play. Like that was Carson Wentz supposed to be getting a job next year. You did a terrible job, Carson. I just say that. You did a terrible job, Carson. Like I don't know many teams that's gonna call you after the season, but that's a whole nother subject right there. We will
Yeah.
definitely have you on before the playoffs ends. We're going to have the Seahawks trivia to end the episode. It's a couple in here I know you're gonna get. There's a couple that you might. Hey, I gave multiple choice, so
Okay. I
multiple
I
choice always
appreciate
is
that
good.
confidence right there, Tom.
All right, so first one, the 2005 NFL MVP was a member of the Seahawks. Who won MVP that year?
Wasn't it Sean Alexander? Or am I missing that?
Sean Alexander, one for one.
Boom.
One for
Let's
one.
go. I still remember that Madden game, man. That was like one of my first like Maddens that I was like, this is so much fun. Like that game was so good. He was on the cover. Oh my gosh. What a guy.
That year, I mean, he still has a lot of the records for the Seahawks still
Oh yeah.
to this day. That was a crazy season. All right, so second question. The most starred games for the Seahawks is 197 games started. That is by Matt Hasselbeck, Walter Jones, or Steve Largent.
Ooh. It's gotta be Jones or Largent, man. I want to say Jones.
Dang, you was right when you was starting. Steve
No.
Largent,
Oh, see, I
197.
he was kind of the Iron Man of that time. I never got to watch him, but I've only heard stories about him and I see those clips. But I always think with wide receivers though, it's before the era where every wide receiver's hamstring hurts. So I forgot about that. They just played no matter what back then.
He was right in picking Walter Jones, though. He was only 10 games behind at
Okay.
187. So
Okay.
he was up there.
Yeah.
Which college campus did the Seahawks first hold training camp? Eastern Washington University, Washington State University, or Washington University?
Ooh. There's no way they went over the mountains, man. They definitely were at Washington, right?
Eastern Washington
No
University.
way. They went over the pass. I know, Tone, you haven't been to Washington or Seattle, this area. That's quite a drive to go to training camp. That's kind of out there. That's 2.5 hours away.
I was reading that yeah, it was a
Yeah.
whole trip over there, but they eventually obviously changed it. I think it was they did that for 10 years and then that's when they switched it up. So
I
they
don't think I was a
probably
fan during that time.
they probably thought the same thing you did. Somebody in there was like, all right, this is too much. You guys are doing too much. Like,
Yeah,
let's make it
seriously.
simpler.
Yeah.
All right. So who wore number 12 before it was retired by the team? Sam Atkins, Jim Zorn, or Dave Krieg?
Man, you pulling out names. I told you, I'm a recent historian. And when I say recent, it's very recent. Let me see. I mean, I love Zorn. I want to just say that. That feels like a good name.
Sam Atkins, he wore number 12 before it was retired. And as those that do not know, the 12 now is really the fans of Seattle. So, little history lesson right there. Who is tied with Jackson Smith and Jigba for most receptions in a single season of 100? Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf, Steve Largent.
I mean, I've got to go back to the well, I think, on this. Largent, right?
Tyler Lockett
Lock it,
tied.
dude.
He's tied with Jackson Smith and Jigba for the
All right,
100th
cut the show.
reception.
Cut the show. I'm out. This is what I told the audience. You knew up front. You knew up front when Tony was explaining this, man. I said it.
This one you definitely gonna get this one. Most passing touchdowns in a single season at 40.
Oh, okay. So that's got to be. Ah, see, you're gonna get this. It scares me. It's got to be Russ, though, right?
Yes, 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 it's Russ.
Okay.
It's Russ.
Because now I'm thinking back to Hasselback. I'm like, maybe Warren Moon. I don't know.
No, when I was reading it, I think Russ has like the first four spots, and then like Gino is fifth when it comes to passing
Oh,
touchdowns in a
dang
single
it,
season.
Gino.
Yeah, yeah. Russ and Gino got the top spots. Seahawks joined the NFL in what year? 76, 68, or 1995?
I think 70, 76.
1976.
Boom.
Back to back right ones. Okay. I think you're gonna get this one. You
Oh,
said
we
you
heating up. Change the title back to Jimmy Butler. We're heating up here.
inside joke. Y'all don't know about that. So this one, since you said recent history, Richard Sherman was drafted in which round? The fifth round, the third round, or the seventh round?
I want to say fifth round, right?
Fifth round.
Let's go.
Correct.
And he was a wide receiver too. He wasn't even a cornerback.
Three straight right there. Three straight for you. We got two more left. The Monday Night Massacre in 2005. The Seahawks shut out which team 42-0? Now it's an NFC East team. Was it the Giants, Commanders, or the Eagles that got shut out 42-0?
I feel like there would only be a storyline if it was the Eagles, because the other 2 maybe just weren't, like, nobody cared as much if the Giants got shut out like that, but I might be remembering that time period wrong. So I'm gonna go Eagles.
That's a perfect logic of how you went about that answer. It was the Eagles, yes.
Philly fans probably rioted at home for that game. The Giants fans, if that would've happened, it would've been, "Ah, damn."
Oh, yeah. Another game.
Yeah,
Can't win
another
them all.
game. Can't win 'em all.
Last question before we get you out of here. Most forced fumbles in a season was 10 by Cam Chancellor, Marcus Trufant, or Dwayne Harper.
Ooh, those are some good names on there. Forced fumbles? See, here's the thing about Cam Chancellor, man. He just was hitting dudes and they couldn't even catch it. That's the thing. He just was lighting them up. Trufant, though, he's on the outside. He's like, strip tackles, stuff like that. It's between those two, I feel like. I'm gonna go Trufant.
It was not Trufant.
What?
Dwayne Harper.
My apologies,
Forced.
Dwayne.
See, you was going on the right path. I'm like, all right, he's about to give it a Cam Chancellor as an option. So
Yeah.
he's going to choose between Trufant and Harper. It was Dwayne Harper that had it.
You just put those other names in there, and I was like, "Oh, that makes sense." Like we're going back to kind of like the Legion of Boom, like our secondary, those kind of guys. And I just was like, "Yeah, it's got to be one of those two." But Dwayne, sorry, my bad, man. If you're listening,
Quick question. This is not a part of the trivia, but I found this interesting because I did not know this. Did you know how the Legion of Boom got its name?
no, unsure.
So it was, I think it was Cam Chancellor was on a radio show, the ESPN radio show of Seattle. Don't
Mhm.
remember the name, 750 or some, I don't remember the number.
Yeah.
But they were talking and he was saying one of the games leading up to it, they need to come bring the boom. A guest texted said they are the Legion of Boom. They said it on the radio show. Richard Sherman co-signed it, and it was history after that.
Oh, I love it.
Of course, the history didn't give love to the fan that sent the text message, but it was a fan that texted, "Yeah, they like the Legion of Boom." The rest was history.
Oh yeah, you just know that like username was probably something so random. It was like eRobot27 or something. And you're like, oh yeah, look at that guy. He's giving us a great example. So there's no way to fact check who that person was.
Facts for those that's watching. Make sure your name is something Antonio 2345, so then they could use
Yeah.
it for
Yeah.
history right there.
Exactly.
But y'all know the vibes, man. That's Griff. Y'all see the handle. Check him out. Threads, Instagram. One day we're gonna get him on YouTube to put this great content over there on YouTube. But for now, Instagram, Threads, check him out. NFL Threads, NBA Threads. He mixes in a couple sports here and there. He don't give credit, he don't like to put that hat on. But if something big enough happens, he'll mix in a little something there.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
great follow for there. Definitely check them out. Y'all know the vibes here. If you stay ready, you don't got to get ready. Bench Mob, we out. Peace.